So this is the fourth video in a series of videos on magic and sexual polarity. And of course I'm talking a lot about the feminine because that is the symbolic pole that I happen to occupy, because I happen to have chosen I didn't happen to, I intentionally chose an incarnation with a female body. And I won't go through the entire arguments, but essentially I've been saying, in the first video, basically, in magic, we access the archetypal resonance of every last thing, including our own bodies. I'm suggesting that although we can be anything socially, especially these days, we cannot change the basic symbolism that we have. And I've tried, I've done this myself. I've really tried and learned the hard way that it can't be done. Then I talked a little bit more about Mercury and the idea of, on the one hand, the magician of the tarot, the idea that there's this substance that can go through endless changes, and that in that sense it's illusionary, because from a certain perspective, form is all Mercury. It's all flowing. It's all changing. It's constantly going from one thing to another, and there's no essential form other than what we impose on it. And that's the magician. So we need to be able to detach from our personal perspective enough to not identify with it, so that we can enact in ritual, and including the rituals of everyday life, that which we intend. And we study our chart to get our basic law, which is formally shown by Saturn. It's Binah on the Tree of Life, and it is that form we intentionally took in order to channel the true will, in a certain way. And in the third video, I talked about how in all magic, what we're trying to do is to marry heaven and earth, which is to say, we want to make our manifested world a constant expression of our angelic intent, so that God and human are one and the same in you. You are that. And we use what's called the Tetragrammaton formula to do that. Above the abyss, we have Father and Mother, Yod and He. Yod and He are actually one. They're always in congress. They're always, will and form are one. Force and form are one. And then coming below the abyss, we have the Vav and the He. So we have basically the sun principle of the Ruach, or the mind, the consciousness primarily, although there's an unconscious part of the Ruach. And finally, we have the daughter principle, which is our instinctual animalistic self. And what I was asserting in that last video is that, contrary to popular opinion, and I gave you my theories as to why that is the popular opinion, magically speaking only, especially in sexual magic, if you're using your body symbolically, alchemically, then if you have a male body, you're working as the sun in the Ruach, which means that you're directing the creative energy of God with your mind. And if you're a female, regardless of anything else, then if you're working sexual magic, you're working your body symbolically, then you're working the daughter principle of the earth and the moon. So in other words, the instincts and the rhythms of nature, to draw the energy, to pull it towards you and nurture it. So that is your power. In this video, I went in more depth about, especially, I'm going to connect it with other videos I did on Black Moon Lilith from this perspective of sexual polarity. Also in the last video, and I think this bears repeating, is that, again, no matter what else, if you're working with your body in magic, then it behooves you, no matter what your anything else about you, sexual orientation, etc., to basically understand your opposite and work with your opposite. Because again, why? Because the Yod and the He, is what it is above the abyss. But the Vav and the He, the second He, the way that we work with those is precisely that, by balancing what we have, with what we do not have, or what we seem to not have. There's another principle I've talked about in other videos, whereby there's what seems to be me, and then there's what seems to be not me. What seems to be not me is still me, but what it is my God. It's the face of my God. applying that principle that what seems to not be me is actually the unconscious part of me, that vast unconscious part of me that I want to unite the part I know about with in a harmonious, balanced way, in order to allow the will to be done through my incarnation. Now, bringing that to sexual polarity, what does that mean? It means that I have to know my vehicle as the female vehicle that it is, work it as the magnetic power center that can draw the creative force of God and nurture it. And I want to balance that by working with and uniting with the male mind or intellect principle, the mercurial principle, in perfect balance again, so I can bring the will through. And I'll just say this one more time, and I'll try to get off my soapbox. But no matter what side of the divide you're on, if you think women should be subservient, or if you think women should just be able to do whatever, and you hate what I'm saying, realize that the reason is, and I'm just speaking from my own personal experience here, that it's because the feminine is something that we've learned to hate. It's something that we've hated for millennia. Speaking on a spiritual level, that made somewhat of sense, in the last couple of aeons. I'm not saying it's a good thing or whatever. I'm not saying I love women. I don't want to see them hurt and things like that, to see us hurt. But the point is that when the body and spirit were opposites, then women were allied with the wrong side. We were allied with the body, because the fact is that is our symbolic identity. Whether we have it as a personal identity is irrelevant. And so the body being that which resists, the body being nature, which in the last aeon, especially the last half of the last aeon, humanity wanted to dominate and control and change. And it's essentially what we keep talking about doing even now, fixing everything and making it comply with our wishes, instead of working as a partner and honoring that mother principle. So in the last aeon, again, the woman was just wicked, basically. The idea is the body was wicked. It had sexual desires that made it do immoral things, and we had nature that would not be part of God, and so that was the split in the polarity in the last aeon. In this aeon, we're shifting. We're completely just throwing that out and saying, no, we're going to bring spirit all the way down into the body. But in order to do that, we have to begin to recognize the feminine in its neutral capacity. So yes, there's still a way in which it can, just like the ego can, just like the mind can, resist the will of God. Yes, it can still become an impediment, usually is, okay? So is the mind. But at the same point, what is the good, positive function of it? How can we work with that which resists? How can we work with the feminine? How can we work with women? How can we work with nature in a creative capacity? Because, again, the son and the daughter, we want to merge them into one. We want to take the left and right sides of our trees and make them unified so that we can bring that energy back up to God. And so there's a constant cycle where the will of humanity, or the true will, is being done on earth through us. Essentially, all of us become embodied gods. We assume our responsibility as creators, as the creator God. We're all kind of like fragments of the creator God. And we can't look outside of ourselves anymore. We have to grow up and say, you know what, it's up to me. I'm not looking for a mom or dad to fix things for me. I am now going to manifest my universe in accord with the true will. So that's the Thelemic mission. And again, the sexual polarity part of that is, how do we work with the feminine? So let me just harken back to the videos that I've done recently on Black Moon Lilith. And I did one for men and women, so that I did an intro one and then one for males and females, I should say. But I just want to kind of put that in this context. So in that video, I talked about how essentially, because what I have, the underlying nature of my power, magical power as a female, is the elements, the elemental power, that which used to be considered wholly demonic, wholly evil in a sense, that really should only be controlled at the very best or something. I wield that on the path of the moon. So that is the tarot path of the moon, Qoph, Qoph, and it connects Malkuth, which is the realm of the four elements, with Nitzak, which is the realm of the emotions, love, Bhakti, and also just, basically that which assimilates and which takes that energy and moves it throughout all of creation, all of my universe. As a female, I literally can work that in just by dreaming, just by basically raising the energy, raising my sexual energy, and by intentionally dreaming, whether that's while I'm sleeping or whether that's while I'm awake. That by putting my attention there, I can wield power directly. It's pretty simple if you're female. Now the tricky part is, and I alluded to this in the last video, is that I have to be purified enough to be wise in that. So, in Magick, ideally, at least, I mean, you'll see all kinds of things out there, but in the ideal world, we're constantly cleansing, constantly banishing ourselves. We're constantly aligning ourselves with our angelic self, our spirit. We're constantly, basically, in a prayerful mode. I mean, effectively, the ideal magician should be like a holy person. It should be somebody who loves God above all. We have a saying in Magick, one you control, the other controls you. That refers to the angel and the demon, or daemon. So one you control, you have to be in charge of your elements. You have to be in charge of your daemon, the one that is there to help you. You have to be the boss of that, and basically always bringing it back to will, and bringing it back to how can you fulfill your spiritual place. Because essentially we're all microcosms. We're all one with the cosmos. We're like all of it in one little body, and our job is to bring our little garden into alignment with God. So basically we have to constantly be identifying and eliminating our illusions and aligning ourselves with what we really came here to do, what we're actually designed to do, and what we picked ourselves to do, and then doing that. So that's in Thelema, the point is find your true will and do it. That's pretty much the intent behind being a Thelemite. It isn't just find fun stuff to do, and because there's no law, like do whatever and party. And I mean, you can party. I'm not saying you don't party, but I'm saying, there is such a thing as getting off track. There's a way to fail in Thelema. It's not just anything goes. So as a female, the tricky part is mastering our emotions to an extent of marshaling them for will. And a lot of that has to do with Bhakti. That might probably should be another video in Venus or Nitzak, how to love, and that probably could be a whole series of videos. So, from the perspective of the female, working the path of the moon is straightforward. It's just basically intended, and dream it, and it'll happen. But from the perspective of the male, as I mentioned in the other video, working with your contrasexual counterpart, so in other words, your hidden goddess, your hidden self, all that stuff that seems to be not you, that seems to be outside of you, basically because there are four elements, you are addressing your universe in four modes: sexual, intellectual, emotional, and spiritual. You are getting to know any given thing. It's, again, easier to think about this in terms of a female partner if you happen to work with one. Essentially, let's just talk about that as a metaphor, or perhaps it's a literal one. The idea being to access the path of the moon, you can't do it directly. You shouldn't try to, but you should work with your female partner regarding getting to know her sexually. Yes, working with her sexually. That's kind of old school. That's what basically always was done. But now also adding those other three elements. So the getting to know her intellectually. You don't have to agree. That's one of the things I said. It's like just understanding, listening to her ideas, and regarding them as both something that are wholly hers, separate from you, and then synchronistically messages for you, and then likewise her emotions, giving a space to them. You may really not understand, them. That's fine, but to actually listen and try to take on board what it is she's feeling, and again, realizing that's completely her feelings, separate from you, and on the same token, it's your goddess, so it's synchronistic for you. It's actually you. So those two polarities, and then also again spiritually, her path. She has a certain trajectory as an independent star, and at the same time, the fact that you're being exposed to it is a synchronicity. It's your goddess talking to you, giving you a personal message. Those two things, completely separate and completely one with you. So those four, working with a female partner or in general your universe, is how you can access that power, access her power to draw, so that by uniting your power to direct and bring out the creative force with her power to draw it, you become one. You become the divine androgyne, even if you're, whatever, butch or feminine, or it doesn't matter if you're a male. But the point is, you become the divine androgyne. So it's like you're the Vav, you're working with the He that way, and then you're basically bringing below. Those two, the daughter and the son, become like the mother and the father above the abyss. So that's how. So the idea is you're not getting confused, not really bringing your personal identity into it. You're simply understanding that contrasexual principle is different from you. So the female, again, is working from Earth, bringing things to Earth, exercising elemental power through body and emotions, and you can relate to that if you're male by those four ways, those four modes, hopefully all in alignment, in order to unite yourself. And if you are feminine, then really you can, first of all, directly exercise power, but to what end? Okay, so another principle is that Bhakti yoga principle. So in Nitzak, which is the number 7, you're working, in Magick we always are working with the number 11. So basically 7 plus 4 is 11. So you're essentially working with Hesed, which is that principle of divine order, or Jupiter. So it's like a father principle below the abyss, to where you are worshiping that father principle of yourself. Again, ultimately, it's just an image of something that cannot be imaged. It's an image of the masculine, particularly, which cannot be really imaged. The true God cannot be thought or seen. It doesn't really have gender. It has no qualities or characteristics. But from a female perspective, you want to work with that directional principle, that principle of your angelic self, through love, through worship. There's a whole, there's just so much that can be said about that, but that is the way to work, especially solo, if you don't have a male partner, or if you don't wish to have a male partner, to find a way to access the masculine you, that hidden part of you, and worship it through love, because by externalizing it in your universe as though it were that male god of yours, then and loving that and allowing that to give you direction, taking direction from that. Of course, ultimately, you have to take responsibility for how you're interpreting the symbols that you're getting, but that is the way to unite your natural symbolism, as and you're in alignment with the earth and the elements and the moon, and that directional principle of will.